Early October 1982, Logan, the typically quiet county seat of Ohio's Hocking Hills, is shocked by a pair of frightful murders and dismemberments. What follows is a twisting story involving lovers, villains, botched investigations, witchcraft, drugs, a wrongful conviction, and the community's loss of life and innocence. This is Township Falls.
Chapter 9, Played Out. Hi, and welcome back to the Township Falls podcast. My name is Sarah, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Adam. We are close to the end of this story, so I would like to encourage you to keep getting in touch. We have been blown away by the interest in this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It really helps us to spread the word if you share this with your true crime-loving friends, and if you leave a review on Apple. In the last episode, we established a timeline of events during the final day in the lives of Todd Schultz and Annette Cooper.
Beginning in the second grade, I had a reoccurring dream that would come back to haunt me many a night. I'm at the top of Old Man's Cave State Park. Dale Johnson is following me. It is winter. The snow in the woods surrounding me are deep. I always remember the sound of a pack of dogs, which further frightens me as I had never owned a dog. Soon it becomes apparent that my options are narrowing, as I am forced to run along a frozen cliff which ends in a craggly point. I can see my breath come out in blasts of icy fear. Both of my pursuers, dogs and Johnston, are on my tail. I'm left with a dreadful decision, to turn to face one or both of my adversaries, or jump off of the bluff. I always wake up before I've had the chance to decide. One time I had this terrible dream and was sent into convulsions. My mom had to call my Aunt Madeline to take me to the emergency room, as my dad was at work.
Updates.
In 2006, the Regal Falls Mill Bridge, which spanned the falls of the Hocking River since 1956, was tore down. A new modern bridge was erected in its place. My wife Sarah's uncle, who on a crazy whim climbed the old truss back in a day, is alive and doing well. In fact, we just might hear from him in another season. In 2007, an old cannonball was found in the area. This prompts George Johnson, local historian and professor emeritus of Hocking College Archaeological Documentation Center, to research. The results find the antique to be part of Lord Dunmore's army, who crossed the Hocking at present-day Logan in October of 1774. In October of 2017, in an attempt to recreate the famous crossing, Dr. Johnson, a direct descendant of Dunmore, led a combination of students and interested citizens across the Hocking River just below the falls.
Animal Crackers Petting Zoo. In 1979, owner Jill Wolfrey was tired of the lions sleeping in the main house. Therefore, she had a cottage built on the property for her and her husband's use. Throughout the 1980s, neighbors of Animal Crackers would complain about their safety, as animals would often escape from their enclosures and roam the forest. Sometime in the fall of 1984, the once employer of Tex Meyer closed its doors. The 21-acre property exchanges hands through the years, and it comes with a series of changes, including the addition of a couple more cabins. In 1997, Campbell's Hollow was opened, advertising private cottages with hot tubs. Campbell's Hollow offers a unique getaway for vacationers. The small concrete pads, including the basketball court, once held cages that housed cougars, tigers, and bears.
Pizza Crossing. Absorbing what was once Logan Video, it's still a community gathering place, particularly after a Chieftains football game. I have fond memories of drinking pitchers of Killian's with friends after an afternoon of playing Dungeons & Dragons. Local artist Kristen Williams painted a wonderful mural of the building's side, which adds to the warm atmosphere.
McDonald's would move from its original Riverside locale closer to Hunter Street. It would move again to its present-day location in the Walmart Plaza. With it went the railroad motif, which was unique to the franchise. One of our listeners, Peach, reached out to us regarding McDonald's locale in the 1980s. For her efforts, we're going to send her a Township Falls button. Make sure to send us your address on Facebook. Originally, McDonald's was directly across from the Super Duper grocery. It was near Helen's Flowers as well as the bowling alley. For a visual of the property, please note that the opening frames of the documentary Reasonable Doubt, whereas both the McDonald's and Helen's Flowers are both present to provide a scale. Directly behind this McDonald's was what us local kids respectively termed the tree. The tree, an old birch, hung over the Hocking River. Throughout the years, kids would construct a crude sort of ladder that helped you get into position, though impossible to descend. In other words, once you committed the climb, the only way down was to jump. Below the outstretched limbs, the water swirled in sort of an undertow. This provided a deep portion that would permit the would-be daredevils a place to jump without touching the bottom. The fast pace of the river in this area ensured that you would not get pulled into the hole.
Railroad. The tracks from Logan to Columbus, where Annette Cooper and Todd Schultz take their fateful final walk, becomes the Indiana and Ohio Railroad. Similarly, the tracks from Logan to Nelsonville become the Hocking Valley Scenic Railway. Train rides are offered throughout the year, whereas the theme changes seasonally. There's a fall foliage tour, a Santa ride, as well as an elegant dinner car. The rail section from Nelsonville south, home of Hocking College, was converted into the Hocking-Adena Bikeway. The trestle bridge still remains. In the mid-90s, I would witness an acquaintance, Andy, jump off of the top of the bridge into the water. He gleefully did it over again.
Sadly, Rockbridge Elementary would close its doors in 2005. It was sold, became a business of some sort, and I believe it became a residence. The property and the surrounding town are notorious victims of flooding, as the Hocking reaches a low point here.
West Elementary School on West Hunter Street would fall victim to the wrecking ball in 2008. I was fortunate to have been in town shortly after. Therefore, I grabbed a brick from my old school where I'd grown up. The brick has a permanent place of honor in our office.
Similarly, the beloved Logan High School, where our parents, as well as Adam and I attended, would lose its perch on the hill. In February 2009, it too was demolished. The area, which long served as the Bill Sauer football field, is now the grounds of Central Elementary School.
The Logan City Pool, where I took Red Cross swimming lessons and spent wonderful countless summer hours, has undergone improvements. It's now the Logan Aquatic Center.
Sarah Johnston. We decided not to use her current last name to give her some privacy and peace. Sarah lives in Southern Ohio these days. She has turned to art therapy to help her healing process. Sarah still has a deep love for animals. Over the months, we have become friends on social media, and she's a very lovely lady. She loves horses and dogs and is pleasant to exchange messages with. Sarah was tormented, had her life turned upside down, and truly lived in fear that someday she would be charged in the death of her daughter and Todd. Sarah was asked at one point if she would sue Hocking County for the ordeal, and she responded that nothing would bring back her daughter or restore her life to what it was. So what was the point? She is 76 years old.
Michelle Cooper is 57 years old. She lives in Colorado and still loves horses. Michelle did not respond to our request to interview. We didn't want to press her, because this entire ordeal was horrific to her, and she was treated very poorly by the people, not only in the investigation, but also in the town. At one point in time, Don Schultz was making comments about how Sarah and Michelle should sit on Dale's lap when he's executed. Michelle was a literal child and did not deserve that. Dale Ray Johnston is 61 years old, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He resides in Central Ohio. He did not respond to our request to speak.
Dale Johnston. Let me tell you about Dale and his fight for justice. Dale went before the court system first in 1993 as a free man seeking to clear his name and recover what was lost in all of this. But that wasn't the end of his troubles. Dale was denied compensation then, as we talked about earlier. But Dale would go before the court system many more times, even after the killers had their day in court. It wasn't as simple as, look, someone else did it, and admitted it, and was incarcerated for the crime. Dale still had that death row conviction on his record. He might have been freed, but that wasn't removed from his record immediately. He wanted to be vindicated. He wanted someone to acknowledge that he didn't murder those kids. In 2011, Dale tried to sue for wrongful conviction again. he was denied. He says he is freed, but never restored to the Columbus Dispatch. In 2012, Dale tried for a declaration of innocence. A judge actually granted this to him. It took 30 years, but finally someone was willing to say that Dale was an innocent man. In 2015, Dale again tried to seek compensation for his wrongful conviction. You should know by now that things aren't going to be as easy as that for Dale. He was denied again. By now, Dale is an old man. He is in his 80s. In 2016, a panel of judges overturned the finding of innocence in a 2-1 vote. Dale's story hasn't ended yet. We will get back to his saga for vindication later, so just like that, Dale's back to being guilty. I wanted to say just one thing on that subject. In America, we are told we are innocent until proven guilty when it comes to the court system. In this case, it is easy to see that when it came to Dale Johnston, he was treated with a presumption of guilt. When you think about it, Dale's presumption of guilt is more than just a botched investigation. It is actually more about standards and human rights. When you really look back at this case, when Dale was tried for murder, they didn't prove he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. As hard as it is to admit, the hearsay we were fed around town during the era of fear is not proof enough that Dale killed anyone or was involved in the crime. Dale Johnston is now 90 years old. He still resides in Ohio, but he understandably moved several counties north. After his release, he has continued to be an advocate for ending the death penalty.
Sandra Schultz passed away in 2020. She was 78 years old.
Greg Schultz is 62 years old and still lives in Ohio, although he has moved from the Logan area. We had a chance to speak in pre-production. Greg has been featured in a number of TV specials about this case.
Eric Schultz is 50 years old now. He lives in Logan as a police dispatcher for the Logan Police Department. His heroics in this role saved many lives. Interestingly, Eric is a certified hypnotist. Eric provided info about Todd for the podcast. Kendra, 55 years old now, she's moved to a nearby county. We exchanged messages with Kendra pre-production, but she declined to participate as she felt we were too pro Dale Johnston. She has contacted our Facebook page 21 times in the last month.
Don Schultz, spicy as ever at 89 years old. His daughter Kendra shared a letter that Don wrote to the editor of the Logan Daily News about the podcast. As it was filled with libelous remarks, it has yet to be published, but we decided to give Don what he wanted to have a say. So here's the letter to the editor as he wished it to be printed. Editor, Logan Daily News. Concerning the article in Thursday, July 14th issue of the Logan Daily News titled Township Falls Podcast Recounts Local Murders. It upsets me because I believe it's just someone else trying to exploit my son's murder for their own profit and notoriety. It also looks like another attempt to paint Dale Johnston as the innocent victim. Concerning the podcast, what does someone who was 7 years old at the time remember about a crime that occurred nearly 40 years ago? Hell, my own son, who was 10 at the time, doesn't remember a lot of the details. With all of the rumors and speculation that was going on at the time, what many remember is most likely false and vague at best. Another question, why bring this up now? I would have thought Logan had moved on from most of this, and I doubt anyone under 50 remembers or even really knows about it. Let me clear up some facts. Dale Johnston was not exonerated in 1988, nor was his conviction overturned. The fact is, the appeals ruled that some of the evidence presented was not admissible, and thus the verdict was dismissed, and he would need to be retried and hence released from prison pending retrial. He was not declared innocent, and the county was financially unable to proceed with a retrial. Plus, the fact that much of the evidence in the original trial was poorly kept, and much of it was ruined with some stolen for souvenirs or just lost. Furthermore, Dale is not entirely innocent here. He may have been innocent of murder, but his hands aren't clean. At the time of the murders, Sandy and I were divorced, and I lived in an apartment on the east end of town. In a conversation with Todd, I expressed reservations about Annette living in the same home where my younger children were living. Todd, in tears, explained he just had to get Annette out of Dale's house because he was sexually assaulting her. Additionally, it was through Dale's own actions that the police centered the original investigation on him, ignoring other important evidence, which may have led them to the real murderers. He lied to investigators, stole and destroyed key evidence, namely Annette's diaries and journals. It's also a matter of record that when the police interviewed Dale, that while searching him, he was found to be in possession of a photograph of a 12-year-old Annette totally nude. Today, this alone would require Dale to report monthly to law enforcement and prevent him from living within 1,000 feet of a school. So, 7 years in prison is light for such a crime. As for the satanic panic, there was one guy who was talking about satanic rituals and tried to tie the murders into Satanism, but he was doing it to get himself in the spotlight and to get on the news. There was nothing to it. Todd and his older brother used to play over by the river, and they never encountered evidence of satanic rituals or gatherings. Being on the fire department and knowing the police like I did, I would have heard or known about satanic problems in or around Logan. Everyone gets it wrong about Todd and Annette. The whole young lovers couldn't wait to get married and that they were fiancés engaged to be married is not true. Yes, they were dating and in a relationship, but where they were not engaged and talks of marriage were not a major subject. Todd was an average Midwestern teenager. He had graduated high school the year before, had a job even though he had just been laid off. He was looking for employment in Lancaster and Columbus and wanted to follow his brother and get out and start life on his own. Finally, the reason our family is very cautious about whom we speak to and share our experiences with in this matter has a lot to do with Bill Osinski. He asked us to be a part of his book, which he explained would be an honest and true account of what happened. He said he wanted to paint Todd as the hero who gave his life protecting his girlfriend. What he wrote was anything but that. It was untrue from his description of Logan, to who Todd was, to the murders and accounts of what happened. I'm really disappointed the Logan Daily News would give this much attention, and even on the front page to this podcast, Todd's father, Don Schultz, Nelsonville, Ohio.
The Unification Church, otherwise known as the Moonies. Founded by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the church, which is infamous for its cult-like memberships and mass weddings, receives and survives harsh criticism in the mid-1980s, particularly when Moon is incarcerated for tax evasion. In 1994, the 40th anniversary of the church's founding, Reverend Moon formed the International Federation for World Peace, which essentially assumes the same function set forth by the previous church. Moon would die in 2012. He was 92. The Church of Satan. Growth in this organization membership is difficult to establish, as they have no physical place of worship, no conventions, no pamphlets, and really no core beliefs so to speak of. What they do have is a social media presence. At almost 400,000 followers, the church uses platforms like Twitter to act as an avenue for frequently asked questions.
Will and Cindy Kernan still live in the area. Will Kernan has been practicing law in Logan for nearly 50 years. Cindy is an advertising executive with the Logan Daily News. Jimmy Jones is sheriff of Hocking County for 5 terms, making his run as sheriff the longest in the history of the county. Jim Jones retired in 2000. He still lives in the area. Lanny North became the sheriff of Hocking County in 2000. In 2021, North faced pressure to resign over his wife's disturbing social media post. North remains in office today despite the drama.
Steve Mowry. After the murders and subsequent trials, the former police captain opens a sporting goods store. Mowry acts as a consultant for the few television investigation shows that cover the case. He still resides in Logan. Jim Powers, a deputy sheriff for Fairfield, Vinton, and Hocking County for 40 years, Powers would go on to work as a chief probation officer for the Hocking County Municipal Court, as well as security guard, It is the inquisitive nature of both Powers and Rodney Robinson that begins a chain of events leading to the arrest of Kenny Linscott and Chester McKnight. Powers dies in 2015 at the age of 75.
Rodney Robinson was a veteran of the Korean War. He had nearly 50 years' experience with law enforcement, where he served as sheriff's deputy and the chief of police for nearby Bremen, Ohio. Robinson died in 2012, just a few years after cracking this quarter-of-a-century-old mystery. He was 80. Jim Thompson left the Logan Police Department in 1995. He joined the Athens County Sheriff's Department, where he remained until his retirement in 2013. It is our sincere hope that he no longer adorns himself with chicken feather necklaces.
Matt Speckman. After his involvement with the decades-old case, the once Logan police officer transfers to the position of Chief Sheriff Deputy for the Hocking County. Mike Stevenson, longtime paramedic for both Hocking and Vinton counties, and my cousin, would serve as a part-time firefighter, Boy Scout master, and assistant to Hocking County coroner. Sadly, Mike would lose his life from complications with COVID-19 in early 2022. He was 58.
Bill Osinski. After having reported for 36 years for 11 newspapers, Osinski openly challenges an internal investigation of the shooting death of a Kentucky state trooper. This results in Bill's name being written on a coffin in effigy at a police-supported parade. In the case, which is reopened because of his efforts, another trooper is found to have lied and had the suspect shot. Osinski would go on to be a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for his reported investigation exposing the illegal practices of the coal mining industry. He continues to write journals and screenplays, residing in Metro Atlanta with his wife Eileen. Don Cannon is 83 years old and resides in Florida. Don has written several books in the years since Horror in Hocking County was released. We have retained contact with him.
The Choot Boys. In the early 2000s, the brothers leave their Friesner Avenue home, which incidentally is only a 2-minute walk to the railroad trestle. They both pull up their stakes and move to Florida, where Heath is a manager of a swanky high-rise oceanfront condo in West Palm Beach. Older brother Ryan still likes to tease me. He does well for himself. He runs a lumber company. Both are lifelong friends to us both. Herman Henry was a veteran who had served in the military for more than 20 years before beginning his career with BCI, where he was highly respected in his field until the Johnson trial happened. After speaking out about the shit show of an investigation run by Jim Thompson, he stated his reputation suffered and his assistance was not as in demand in the area. After 32 years with BCI, Herman Henry retired and went on to work as a Vinton County Sheriff's Deputy. Herman died in 2004. He was 71 years old.
Thomas Tyak. With a broad range of practice, from white-collar crimes to OVI, DUIs, to divorce and motor vehicle accidents, Tom Tyak and his Tyak law firm in downtown Columbus are still going strong. Bob Sir, a lifelong warrior against the death penalty. Bob practices law in and around Franklin County for 52 years. Often described as a Renaissance man, he died in 2013 at the age of 70. Chris Veit, with a career spanning just over 55 years, Veit still practices in his downtown Logan office. He is honored by the Ohio State Bar Association in 2018 for 50 years of service.
Fred Mong. After the trial of Dale Johnston, Mong would continue his career in law. Eventually, he will be Hocking County probate judge. His civic duties also lead him to teach scores of Boy Scouts the Citizenship and the Community Merit Badge. Judge Mong died in 2006 at the age of 68. Charles Gherkin. 45 years and still going, the law practice of Charles Gherkin is on 2nd Street in Logan. He still assists students with the Logan High School mock trial competition.
Dr. Louise Robbins. Known notoriously in the legal world as the hired gun, Robbins helped many prosecutors put many men either behind bars or on death row simply by employing her forensic analysis, which is to say her uncanny ability to identify people based on their footprints. Experts in the scientific community have challenged her methodology and conclusions, some have gone as far as to label her a fraud, as she failed to publish her techniques so they could be peer-reviewed. Google her name and you'll almost always find it accompanied by the words discredited footprint expert and the shoe print expert from hell. It is her testimony that seals the deal in the trial of Dale Johnston.
Steve Ryan, the prosecution's star witness and he of hypnotized fame, still lives in the county seat, where he serves his community as the president of the Hocking Hills Aladdin Shriners. Dr. Jeff Hilson III, a beloved teacher with Columbus City Schools for a quarter of a century. Dr. Hilson authored 10 original works as well as repenned 15 classics. A family man to the end, Hilson would die in 2021. We will never know, good nor ill, of the impact that Hilson's testimony would have had in the trial of Dale Johnston.
Sandra Starner. Mrs. Starner died just 10 days before Sandra Schultz. Sandra Starner was a beloved elementary school teacher for more than 30 years and positively impacted many young lives in that time. She gave me the confidence to pursue an interest in writing and often supplied me with little blank hardback books for my stories. She was 78 years old. Mr. Dale Johnson was a Korean War vet who pursued a career in education. He taught children in both Athens and Hocking County before moving on to be the principal of Rockbridge Elementary for years. He was 87 years old when he passed away in 2018.
Shirley Frazier. Other than the killers, Frazier is the last person to see the teens just before their brutal deaths. Shirley has a long career at the Lancaster Post Office, where she eventually retires. She passed away in 1998 at the age of 54. Kevin Tex Meyer. Sarah's mother said that Tex was in fact the son of her step-grandfather Melvin. Tex moved a few counties north after his run-ins with the law. He eventually committed suicide. It is often speculated if Meyer was a participant in the 1982 murders. The hilt of irony being that it is McKnight's testimony, whereas he pulls his .22 pistol on Tex, that exempts him from his further blame.
Judy Linscott still lives in the Hocking Hills, but has remarried and now goes by a different last name. She is an avid animal lover. Without Judy's bombshell revelation, chiefly that Todd and Annette were at her house just prior to their deaths, this case would likely remain a mystery. Kenny Linscott, the man who called the sheriff's department to inquire if the bodies had been found. Linscott would only be sentenced to time served for his role in the deaths of Cooper and Schultz. He stayed in Logan until he died in 2013 at the age of 52. There was no funeral service.
Chester McKnight still contends that he alone murdered Annette Cooper and Todd Schultz by gunshot. In multiple interviews, he states that Kenny Linscott was merely an accomplice, assisting in the dismemberments and later allegedly burying the body parts by himself. In 2016, Cleveland.com produced a list of the most notorious people in each of Ohio's 88 counties. The list includes murderers, crooked politicians, and cult leaders. McKnight gets the distinction for Hocking County. Chester has been forthcoming about his plight, going so far as to mention in interviews that he will likely die in prison. He remains incarcerated at the Marion Correctional Facility.
Todd Schultz is buried at the Shaw Cemetery in Logan. Annette Cooper would be cremated by Cook & Sons in Columbus. Her final resting place is known only by her mother. May they both rest in peace.
Rich Ratvasky. Artist and producer Ratvasky's electronic musical arrangements include keyboards, guitars, and vocals. In the 80s, Rich was in a band called Big Engine. He then joined the industrial band Lick. He would go on to form the band Team Smile and Nod, and eventually release a series of solo albums. He polished his sound by playing clubs and raves during the 90s underground electronic scene. Rich's music has been featured in television shows and commercials. He continues to love and make music in his hometown of Columbus.
Adam and Sarah Lehman. College and employment would see us relocate to north central Ohio. Here we still dwell as the proud parents of 2 human and multiple animal babies. Our parents still reside in the Hocking Hills. We'll return in Season 2 of Township Falls.
It has been years since I had my childhood reoccurring dream. A couple of years back, I spent a snow day afternoon sledding with my kids. That night, likely prompted by our daytime adventure, I had the dream. I'm at the top of Old Man's Cave State Park. It is winter. The snow and the woods surrounding me are deep. I can discern the far-off sound of a single dog. Soon it becomes apparent that my options are narrowing as I am forced to run along a frozen cliff which ends in a craggly point. I can see my breath come out in blasts of icy fear. I'm left with a dreadful decision, to turn around or jump off the bluff. I'm awake but not in fear. Our dog Scout sees that I'm moving and rhythmically thumps his tail onto our legs at the foot of the bed. It is there, while safe in my home, recalling my dream, that it dawns on me. This time I was not chased by either a pack of dogs or Dale Johnston. I never had the dream again. This is Township Falls.
On the next bonus episode of Township Falls, you'll hear how your hosts feel about the podcast, the case, the trial, and the lives and deaths of Todd Schultz and Annette Cooper as we opine upon the case. We would love to hear from you. Give us a call on our recorded line at 419-777-1147. To ask questions, make comments, or just say hi. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to Township Falls Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss any bonus episodes that we may release. We're still trying to track down photos of Annette Cooper to share with her mother. If you have photos, you can email us a digital copy at townshipfallspodcast@gmail.com. Music by Rich Rat Vasky and Layman's Terms.